I would suggest, do you think, in terms of about £10,000?
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the greatest items ever featured on Antiques Roadshow.
The fact that it's got all these vines and grapes on it, it might have been used as a wine cooler or a champagne cooler.
First up, we're going to be looking at some incredible movie props that have appeared on the show.
Number 7. TIE Fighter Pilot Helmet.
And I have things like batarangs from Batman and Walther PPKs from Bond films, but my true passion is Star Wars.
The force is strong with this Antiques Roadshow item. Sure, you can find a replica on shelves in your closest toy store, but nothing beats the real deal. Star Wars props are in extremely high demand, what with it being one of the biggest media franchises on the planet.
So you've made it a real mission then to track these pieces down?
Yeah, it's a major undertaking. I spend a lot of time doing this.
This guest stunned the experts and viewers at home alike when they brought in the helmet of a TIE Fighter pilot from the movie A New Hope, the first film in the series.
With this bit of plastic?
Yes, for this bit of plastic.
With only 12 of these in existence, it's no wonder that this baddie's helmet got a whopping price tag of £50,000.
I think to anyone who's not in your world, it's astonishing.
Number 6. Pratmobile. It doesn't get more British than this. When Antiques Roadshow celebrated 100 years of the BBC, we were treated to an exhibition of this car, from arguably the most iconic British comedy of all time, Only Fools and Horses. The Pratmobile was of course Del Boy's lime green Ford Capri, and we got to witness it in all its tacky glory.
When they built the Capri, they decided to make it as tacky as possible, as it was going to be Raquel's family car, and as you see, it's tacky.
Being the massive fan of the series that this guest was, he showed off another piece of memorabilia from the show, the door to the garage.
Scott is the proud owner of several relics from Only Fools and Horses, some salvaged from locations where the series was filmed.
These pieces didn't get a valuation like your typical Antiques Roadshow items, however, as they were sent to a museum for all fans to enjoy.
And what a joy to see these things. Thanks so much.
No problem at all.
Number 5. Wizard of Oz Pikes.
The Wizard of Oz is one of the most beloved films based on the books by Frank Baum.
We turn to the American version of the show for this entry. One of the most sought-after movie props in history is the red shoes from The Wizard of Oz. Alas, this guest didn't have that item, but they had something that was just as fascinating.
The designer of the costumes was a very famous costume designer in Hollywood at the time, Adrian. And he designed these spears, or pikes as sometimes they're called, as part of the costume.
Do you remember those strange green fellows known as Winkies in the film? Well, here's 2 of the pikes they carried when guarding the towers. In the end, the host valued it at $15,000, about £12,000. Not bad at all for a $500 purchase price.
And 2 of them would bring in excess of $30,000.
Excellent.
Number 4. EastEnders Pieces.
Just a prop, which is why it's so light.
EastEnders is a cultural touchstone in the UK, so it's no wonder some of the items used in its episodes have been preserved to this day.
And that was what, 1985?
Yeah, those were the good old days. It was downhill after that.
For this Antiques Roadshow special, Fiona Bruce met up with one of the show's biggest icons, Anita Dobson. Dobson, who played the character Angie Watts, showed off some of the pieces she wore on the show. One that any fan will instantly recognise is the outfit she wore on the Christmas Day special from 1986, the episode that hit over 30 million viewers.
And then this outfit. Now, I remember this scene.
And who could forget that shocking scene? We don't often think of soap opera props as being particularly valuable, but it's comforting to realise that they're kept well maintained, as they deserve to be.
What a joy, so lovely to meet you and fantastic to see a slice of history.
Number 3. Indiana Jones Chest. Back again with another American episode here. Sorry, we just had to talk about this one. This lucky antiquer got their hands on a piece from another of Lucasfilm's biggest IPs.
What did you think growing up with this in your apartment?
Oh, I thought it was neat. I got to tell my friends that I had the Ark.
It's an actual prototype of the Ark of Covenant from Indiana Jones' Raiders of the Lost Ark from 1981. The guest's father actually worked on the film, and that's how it landed in his possession.
What part did your father play in this particular prop?
My father's a pyrotechnician, was, and a stage tech. His job was to load it with pyro and get it ready to shoot.
However, it wasn't exactly treated with the respect it deserved. In fact, this guest was simply using it to store blankets. Alas, his opinion of it certainly changed when he learned of its value. An absolutely mind-blowing 98,000 quid.
Not bad for hot glue and spray paint.
Absolutely.
That belongs in a museum. Number 2, Oddjob's hat.
This, I think, is an amazingly iconic collection of objects.
When Antiques Roadshow came to Wales, one guest brought in an impressive collection of James Bond memorabilia. What absolutely shocked the appraiser was the inclusion of a prop hat from Goldfinger. It was previously thought that there was only one copy of Oddjob's deadly hat. As it turned out, the guest's brother-in-law was a driver for Aston Martin on the set of Goldfinger. He had asked the studio for a prop hat as a souvenir, and they agreed. His brother-in-law didn't treat it very well, unfortunately, using it as a childhood plaything with his friends.
It's absolutely in pieces because it didn't have the steel in it anymore, so therefore whenever it landed, it damaged it. So,
okay.
They caused significant damage to the hat, reducing its value by thousands of pounds. Still, a potential payday of £30,000 is nothing to sneeze at.
Wow. Glad I didn't lose it then.
Number 1, Joker's outfit.
And then the pièce de résistance, best at 100, 150,000. Fantastic.
Who's your favourite Joker? Heath Ledger? Joaquin Phoenix? Well, it's certainly not Jared Leto, but there's a good chance your answer was Jack Nicholson. Yes, out of all the actors to don Batman's nemesis makeup, perhaps the one with the most recognisable gear was that of the 1989 Tim Burton flick. One guest brought in this iconic outfit to the Antiques Roadshow, and Fiona Bruce couldn't believe her eyes.
Obviously not recognisable at all, is it?
No.
So this is the bat belt that went around the bat suit. Again, now this is worn by Michael Keaton.
Whilst collector Stephen Land brought in 2 more pieces of Batman memorabilia to the show, it was definitely this outfit worn by Nicholson that took the crown. It comes as very little surprise that this piece of movie history came with an eye-watering valuation of £150,000. Not a bad break for the clown prince of crime.
Things like Roman rings on this programme that aren't worth anything like that. My goodness.
Next, here are some of the items that brought guests to tears.
Number 9, English Delftware.
They're very peculiar. What do you know about them?
How much would you spend on a pair of plates? Well, probably not as much as these 4 porcelain pieces were valued at. Dating back to around 1695, these were passed down by the guest's husband's family. Created as an attempt to replicate Chinese porcelain, these pieces are surprisingly well sought after.
This is really quite an important piece of pottery.
Even in their damaged condition, these rare items are worth a staggering £10,000 and £20,000 respectively.
Oh my God!
As such, the guest simply couldn't hold back her tears, and we can't blame her.
Can I cry now?
If you really want, that's right, yeah.
Number 8, a hidden message. This piece certainly has an interesting history.
And the discs that are around it, they're known as spoons.
The guest's grandmother was the original owner, and she had deduced that whoever gave her this brooch had likely broken her heart, as she refused to talk about them. That's where expert Susan Rumfit dropped the bombshell that these brooches were traditionally worn at weddings.
You're joking.
No.
Oh my God. Do you know what? I wonder who broke whose heart here?
That's where the waterworks started.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It is emotional, isn't it?
Finally getting some insight into her grandmother's love life and possible identity of her grandfather was simply overwhelming. Number 7, rock crystal box. This piece is the total package.
Was it all bright and sparkly and in 3D before you bought it?
No,
Did
it
you
wasn't
see
at all.
Picked up by the guest at an online auction for only £32. Believed to just be made of glass by the seller, this piece was actually made of rock crystal and silver. Its unique design meant it was likely from the 1850s in a neo-Renaissance style. That £32 was an excellent investment, as Joanna Hardy valued it at around £4,000 to £6,000.
Really?
And gosh, was this antiquer happy to hear that number. Her reaction was priceless. Number 6. Nelson Teapot.
So there we have the anchor and the name of Nelson at the top.
You may be familiar with Lord Nelson, one of the most celebrated icons in British naval history, who notably battled against the French. This guest found themselves in possession of some of Nelson's items, including this rather peculiar teapot. Ironically, the piece is actually not a British teapot, but a French one.
Probably old chinaware from France that was hanging around in London, and they painted the decoration on there of oak leaves and proud British emblems there.
What's more, John Sandon said it's very likely Nelson used this teapot personally. Turns out that this simple piece was worth about £20,000.
I'm gonna cry!
An eye-watering price, as evidenced by this guest's reaction. Number 5. Father's watch.
Because this clearly is not the original, so he had the straps changed throughout his life.
When this guest's father passed, he left him with a beautiful gift. The whole family turned up for this tearful valuation, as the inherited watch turned out to be a rare red Submariner Rolex. The guest recalled how he, his parents and brother all took a day trip to Birmingham when he was 7 years old, and that was the day his father purchased this item. The £20,000 valuation instantly moved him.
It's something that you've obviously loved, and you're going to keep forever, aren't you?
Yeah. The scene fell completely silent, but his face truly displayed how grateful he was to his father for trusting him with this.
And it was your dad's, and I think that's a lovely, lovely, lovely story.
Number 4. Wimbledon dress.
I mean, that is really kind of restrained, isn't it?
Retired tennis player Liz James came to the Antiques Roadshow and brought some of her dresses. This stunning selection of tennis dresses had some pretty hefty price tags attached to them, ranging from £800 to £1,000. Though it was more about recounting her stories rather than the valuation that moved Liz to tears.
Does it bring it all back?
I have to say it has now.
With an inspiring career like that, it's no wonder.
It seems almost a crime to have to put a value on them.
Number 3. Chinese porcelain vase. By this point, we all know how wildly valuable Chinese porcelain vases can be, but this one still managed to blow us away.
You can see there are a few stains, a few dots.
Despite its slightly battered condition, this large piece, adorned with beautifully drawn dragons, still maintained its value. Said value was up to £50,000.
Ooh, that's still shockingly surprising.
The guest's delayed reaction is exactly what would happen to us, so we can't blame her.
Nearly speechless.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to make you cry.
Once it finally sunk in, she couldn't help but cry her eyes out. Number 2. Bracelet. Jaw-dropping doesn't even begin to describe the price of this gorgeous item. Though the owner couldn't pinpoint the origin of their inherited bracelet, the Antiques Roadshow team managed the task, deducing that it was in fact an Art Deco piece created between 1927 and the early 1930s.
Oh my god! Wow! That's amazing!
It turns out that said item was worth upwards of £150,000, a price tag that meant instant weepy eyes for the guest. But the tears didn't stop there, as her priceless reaction even caused expert Geoffrey Munn to tear up too.
We're both gonna cry. No, I think that's unbelievable.
Tears all round, and for good reason. Number 1. The letter.
It's the letter he left explaining to my nan why he felt he had to put himself forward, that would go to her in case anything happened.
Sometimes on Antiques Roadshow, it's not about the money, it's about the story. This letter was written during World War II by the guest's grandfather when he was just 19 years old.
Understand, darling, I was to fly over Germany, of a night, and also sometimes of a day. It was the one thing you dreaded, wasn't it? That was the reason I didn't tell you.
The letter was addressed to his beloved, stating that he believed he had no choice but to volunteer to be a gunner for the RAF.
Remember, don't give up, and keep your chin up, darling. Au revoir, not goodbye, beloved. Yours with all my love, my dearest Teddy.
He sounds almost certain he won't make it back alive, and sadly, he did not. Reading the letter aloud leads both its owner and expert Hilary Kay to break into tears.
That's quite a sad letter.
really much more one can say about that, actually.
Up next, we're going to be looking at some medals that have incredible stories to tell.
Number 8. Expedition Medal.
I was given these by my grandmother, who is this lady here.
This guest brought in a number of items given to her by her grandmother, who was once the fiancée to Charles Voyds, a heroic figure who participated in the British National Antarctic Expedition. Amongst these items were photographs, ribbons, and most importantly, a medal.
This tiny thing over here in the corner, now that is what gets me very excited.
But you may be surprised as to the reason why he was given this elaborate medal. It was not actually for his work during the Discovery Expedition, but rather for playing sports. That's right, when the expeditioners weren't working during those 3 years, they enjoyed their time in the Antarctic playing at sporting events.
Sledding, skating, skiing, and shooting, and maybe few for. So, I mean, they must have taken out 5 or 6. This is one of them.
With little precedent to go by due to its rarity, John Baddeley surmised it was worth around £10,000.
I think Granny would have been very surprised at that one.
Number 7. A Heroic Rescue. This was the 1914 Christmas tin that just kept on giving.
Then we pulled out a World War II Royal Navy Distinguished Service Medal.
Not enough can be said for the first few medals that we were introduced to from this collection, showing its original owner's involvement in both the First and Second World Wars. But the cherry on top was this medal, given to those who were on the boat, the Carpathia. You may recognise that name, as it was the ship that went out to rescue survivors of the Titanic.
The Carpathia Titanic Medal.
Yeah.
In all the years I have been collecting medals, and I have been collecting medals for maybe, well, it's 45 years now. I started when I was a reasonably small lad, when I was 6. This is the only one of these I've ever held.
John Cargill was there on that fateful day, lifting people from the water into the lifeboat. To do all that and then go on to serve in 2 world wars truly speaks of his character.
With the Titanic medal, £10,000.
Number 6. Dickin Medal.
I don't think I've ever held a Dickin medal before.
You may be forgiven for thinking that it's only our species that are granted medals for their efforts during wartime. However, you would be wrong. Dickin medals are awarded to animals who accomplished extraordinary tasks. And this one that was brought onto the roadshow actually belonged to a pigeon.
It's important to remember that the Dickin medal goes on being awarded. Animals are still doing extraordinary things in wartime.
That's right, this brave little bird escaped a plane crash during World War II and then went on to fly home. In doing so, it helped identify where and when the crash occurred, potentially saving a survivor. Even more shocking is that these medals actually fetch a pretty tidy sum. This one was valued at £10,000.
He was a wonderful pigeon.
He was.
You could say the most expensive pigeon ever.
Number 5. Ulster Rising. The Irish War of Independence was first inspired by the 1916 Easter Rising, in which Irish Republicans rebelled against British rule.
You have 2 sets. Who did they belong to?
One of the guests' family had participated in that event in Dublin, and as such was awarded with medals. The medals, which were passed down generations, belonged to the guest's grandmother's aunt and uncle for combat.
The medals themselves came out in 1941.
These are incredibly rare items to find, so it was no surprise that expert Mark Smith was left with his jaw on the floor. Furthermore, medals given to women were even more rare. With this in mind, they were given a price tag of around £20,000.
Jeepers.
Number 4. FA Cup Medals. Before retiring, Newcastle United player Bobby Cowell had quite an impressive career as a defender.
He played for Newcastle 1943 to 1955. That's when, unfortunately, he had to retire.
His grandson brought in a selection of memorabilia to the roadshow, including a shirt, ball, and cheque. Most impressive of all was the FA Cup medals, awarded to winners of the years 1951, 52, and 55.
This is a time when Newcastle were really up there.
Raj Bisram was so excited to see them, he valued them at a whopping £25,000 and encouraged the owner to try to get them on display at St James's Park because of their major cultural significance.
Very nice.
Number 3. An impressive selection. Sir Hugh Watts earned a wide array of medals for his service to Britain. We had the treat of looking at these when a family member brought them onto the show.
So this is someone who has had
a rather spectacular career.
From a 1939 Defence Medal to a 1953 Coronation Medal, it was clear that Watts was quite remarkable. But we actually got to learn of the harrowing responsibilities he had to earn such awards. As it turns out, he was tasked with defusing letter bombs sent to the British government during World War II.
Bomb disposal, but very specific. Very specific. In that he's looking at letter bombs.
He actually witnessed what such a device could do to people and decided he never wanted anyone to suffer the same fate.
He saw what these things could do to people.
The guest, of course, insisted that despite the high valuation of £8,000, the medals were not for sale. Number 2. D-Day medals.
There's a military cross, which is really only 2 away from a Victoria Cross. But it has this on the ribbon, the bar. Now that means he was awarded the Military Cross twice.
When the expert tells you these are the best World War II medals he's ever come across, you know they must be important. These stunning selection of medals each have inspiring stories to tell, but what instantly caught Mark's eye was the one given to the first men who landed on D-Day. This guest's great uncle was actually the first man on June Beach on D-Day, who then led the liberation of Caen.
D-Day, 6th of June, 1944, Mike Green, Juno Beach.
The medals even include the name, date, time and location, further immortalising his bravery. The story of Lieutenant Colonel Edward Maxwell Morrison is one of legend.
In the hand-to-hand fighting, we devastated the post, and although we killed many, many more surrendered.
Number 1. Victoria Cross.
There is really only one medal which every medal collector craves to have in their collection.
Never have we seen expert Mark Smith this excited to see something on the show before. This guest's father was a Sikh soldier known as Nayak Ayan Singh, who was awarded for his bravery in the Second World War. During a battle in Burma, now Myanmar, Nayak exemplified bravery many times, including when he valiantly ran to Japanese camps and took them down single-handedly.
Our tanks had now moved up and come under fire, but Nayak Ayan Singh, who had sustained several wounds, again rushed forward and annihilated a Japanese anti-tank gun crew, capturing the weapon single-handed.
As such, he was given the Victoria Cross, made of bronze and worth a whopping £250,000.
One of the things that she said was, I do not want this medal to be made of something precious, because it's not about the medal, it's about the deed behind the medal. That's the important thing.
His son was beyond proud.
They are some of the most iconic things that we have in this country.
There's a chance you might have some of these items yourself, because next up, we're going to be looking at toys brought onto the show.
Number 10. Can't beat the classics. We open with one of the heaviest hitters in the toy industry, the iconic lady known as Barbie.
That's very exciting. I think we should have a look at Barbie.
This guest brought in a piece from all the way back in the 1960s. It's in fantastic condition because this guest never played with it as a child. It was gifted to her uncle by a relative who worked for the doll's creator, Mattel, and was one of the very first iterations of the doll.
I mean, they cost $3 when they were first launched.
Though the guest wasn't sure of the item's worth, expert Judith Miller certainly was, and she put a whopping price tag on it.
This would sell for between £1,200 and £1,500.
Wow. Would you spend £1,500 on a Barbie? Well, apparently, some would. Number 9. One of the first.
Will I buy it for my son?
Train collecting is no joke. Buyers are willing to pay hundreds to even thousands of pounds to get their hands on some of the finest items for their collection. Arguably, at the very top of the industry is Hornby, who have been in business for over 120 years.
Frank Hornby made the conscious decision to make his trains types that could be taken to pieces.
That's what makes this toy from 1920 so impressive. Though surprisingly, this item was only estimated at around £400, however it was recorded in 1990. As this was taken from an older episode of Antiques Roadshow, we really do wonder how much the price must have skyrocketed in the years since.
Although this train set is, from a train collector's point of view, a wonderful thing and terribly important historically, it doesn't actually reflect in the value.
Number 8. Remarkably old. It wouldn't be an Antiques Roadshow list without a piece this old. This doll was believed to be one of Parisian origin by expert Bunny Campione, who also put a date on the item of around the 1860s.
I think she's one of the earliest I've seen. I think she's about 1860.
Yes, it's a little creepy, but regardless, you have to have a deep appreciation for the craft of something made this long ago. It should come at no surprise that this item, being as old and as in wonderful condition as it is, fetched a valuation of up to £2,000. That is certainly not scary.
Did she have a name?
Lady Eleanor, I believe.
Lady Eleanor.
Number 7. Jonathan's collection.
I like to set them up in a diorama kind of thing sometimes and take a photograph of it.
When it comes to famous toy collectors, Jonathan Ross stands at the absolute pinnacle. If you've seen any videos on his collection, you know he is basically a historian of the industry. When Jonathan was invited onto the show, he let us have another glimpse at some of his rarer pieces, including these legendary Micro Man, all the way from Japan.
These are called Henshin Cyborg. Henshin means transforming cyborgs.
Their history is a lot more influential on the toy industry than you think, being some of the first to incorporate a smaller design, which would later become an industry standard.
Mikuro Man!
It's unsurprising that this near-perfect collection is worth a pretty penny. Number 6. A little bit creepy.
My mum was given him when I was a baby by a great aunt.
One look at that face might make you leap, but once you find the courage to look again, you might be pleasantly surprised. This cuddly toy, supposedly of a rabbit, dates back to around the 1920s or 30s. Despite its horrifying visage, it actually has origins in one of the most iconic character goods producers in the world. That's right, it's made by Disney. This is actually supposed to be Oswald the Rabbit, one of their earliest mascots.
And I can't understand how Mickey Mouse came along and he's not so well known.
As such, it was given a whopping £2,000 price tag. Maybe this guest won't be so fearful of it now that she knows how much it's worth. Number 5. Made from what?
Is a little very naively carved, but really beautifully carved nevertheless, spinning Jenny.
With the rising costs of oil these days, toy companies are looking for new alternatives to plastic for making toys. Well, hopefully they don't go down this route. This small item brought onto the show took a unique approach in its design. It's actually made from something a bit more grim. Bones. Mutton bones, to be precise, so no fancy ivory here, as the guest had hoped.
And they would make them and then they would sell them every so often in the local market.
Yeah, okay.
And that would help pay for wine, women and song and whatever else.
Slightly strange, but quite fascinating nonetheless. This piece's strength is in its story. Expert Hilary Kay said the item was from a World War I prisoner of war camp.
You can see these are all hand-carved cogs and wheels and interlocking pieces. And originally, it would have had a linkage from the spinning wheel itself down to the drive.
Right, we thought it might have had something.
The valuation of this calcium creation, up to £1,000. Number 4. 70s style.
Well, we really do have a taste of the 70s here.
The most impressive items on Antiques Roadshow are the ones that are essentially time capsules. These dolls are certainly of their time. Known as Blythe's boutique dolls, these fashionable little ladies reek of 70s style. They date back to around 1972, so you wouldn't expect them to be really worth that much.
The massive head, the eyes, and then the tiny feet.
The tiny feet.
But that's where you're wrong. A single doll alone could be up to around £1,000. The estimate for this impressive collection? £5,000. Now that is groovy.
50-year-old there.
The eyes change colour.
The eyes change colour.
Number 3. A Paddington First.
Of course, he needs no introduction. He is Paddington Bear.
When visiting the Ulster Folk Museum, the team gave us a special privilege of seeing a Paddington Bear plush like no other. What separates this from the others is that it's actually one of the oldest in history.
So he's giving you that sort of, that Paddington disapproving stare that we all know from the books.
This adorable cuddly toy of the bear from darkest Peru has quite the shocking origin. You see, it was made by the company Gabriella Designs by a lady called Shirley Clarkson. That's right, her son is none other than Top Gear's Jeremy Clarkson. With a history like that, you'd better not spill any marmalade on it.
Probably somewhere between sort of 50 and 70 pounds in this condition.
Right.
Number 2. A Star Wars classic.
So a special programme about toys would be nothing without a game. So of course we have one.
Was there any doubt that one of the biggest action figure franchises in history would pop up here? Well, this will still impress you. Yes, various Star Wars pieces have appeared on the show throughout its run, but one of the most memorable has to be this collection of toys. The star piece is undoubtedly the Jawa, which was one of the first toys in the run.
I'm going to go basic, better, best. Yes?
You sure? You got
that. The condition of the box was even graded too, but at the end of the day, they're just toys, right? Wrong. The Jawa alone is worth around £20,000.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really special example of a figure right there. One of the things you do have to watch on this particular figure is that they have been faked over the years because they're super rare and very, very desirable.
The force is definitely strong with this one. Number 1. The Curious Bear. This one's been making waves lately after it appeared on the Christmas special. This lady brought in the bear she'd had since she was a child.
Incredibly rare colour, a rare size, because most of them were smaller than this.
She treated it like any young girl would, and even ended up storing it in a carrier bag for years. So imagine her shock when she realised she'd been sitting on a tidy sum. The bear was actually made for the brand Louis Vuitton. Yes, that Louis Vuitton. It was made in 1904 and was picked up by the guest's father for just 20 quid. Imagine her surprise when expert Bunny Campione told her it was worth around £15,000.
Value-wise, 15,000.
What?
Very nice.
And it's just been put in a bag in the wardrobe.
Well, thank God it was, because it's in such good condition.
Do you have any collector's item toys at home? Let us know in the comments below.
I'd love to find someone who would really appreciate them and show them off a bit.
Last but certainly not least, here are the highest valuations ever seen on Antiques Roadshow.
Number 10. Art Deco Bracelet. Sometimes an item is valued so highly that it brings the guest to tears. It was very hard to pinpoint the origins of the bracelet as its owner had travelled around the world. Thankfully, the current owner brought it onto the Antiques Roadshow. Expert Geoffrey Munn deduced that it was in fact an Art Deco piece created between 1927 and the early 1930s. Though he wasn't entirely sure of its designer, he was absolutely certain of its value.
Oh my God! That's amazing!
After giving the mind-blowing valuation of £150,000, both its owner and the expert were brought to tears.
Oh, darling, we're both going to cry. No, I think
that's unbelievable.
Number 9. Stunning Portrait.
Now, it really isn't often that I get a picture like this on the Antiques Roadshow. This is an artist I know very well.
You wouldn't think a portrait of one artist by another would be all that valuable, but that was certainly the case with this amazing work brought onto the show in 2016. The man in the painting was Leopold Lorenstam, who was primarily known for his wonderful engraving skills. It was brought in by his great-great-grandson.
That's the date of the picture, it's up there on the picture.
Yes, yeah, and it was displayed in the Royal Academy.
The main selling point, though, was the artist, renowned Victorian painter Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema. This beautiful symbol of friendship had a jaw-dropping valuation of £200,000 to £300,000. The owner was certainly giddy after hearing that.
The trouble is, it will never be sold.
Number 8. President's Jacket.
Who did it belong to?
This jacket belonged to JFK.
History buffs with deep pockets are willing to spend exuberant amounts of money for a little slice of the past. So when one guest brought on this jacket belonging to none other than John F. Kennedy, expert John Baddeley couldn't believe it.
This beautiful young girl, aged 21, 22.
Yes.
Down in the south of France,
yes.
on holiday.
Yes.
Happens to bump into JFK.
Yes.
They fall in love.
Yes.
He then disappears back to the States.
Though he was at first sceptical of the validity of the guest's claim, after learning it was Kennedy's exact size and hearing the story behind it, he had to think of a number fitting of such an iconic piece, Baddeley's estimate fell to between £200,000 and £300,000.
That is a lot of money.
Number 7. Crawley Silver. One family's inheritance turned out to be much more than your usual heirloom when they brought in their collection of thought to be worthless silver.
I would suggest you think in terms of about £10,000.
The items were found in a box under Richard Hobbs' father's bed, but perhaps a museum would have been a better place for them. That's because they were actually highly valuable Crawley silver, including stirrup cups and an early wine taster.
I think this could be an early wine taster.
As such, this item got the stunning valuation of £250,000. However, it would turn out to be even more valuable, as it later sold for £300,000. Number 6. A rare guitar.
Now you brought me in an exceptionally rare guitar with an even more interesting story behind it.
When it comes to rock and roll memorabilia, few things can compare to a guitar owned by a legendary musician. On one episode of Antiques Roadshow, a lucky individual brought in a guitar once owned by George Harrison himself, 1/4 of the Beatles.
In the 70s and 80s, I was doing lots of recording sessions on guitar. And one of the things I used to do regularly was sessions for handmade films.
Okay.
That George Harrison started. I was asked to play guitar, which was great.
With its fantastic condition and historical significance within music history, this guitar was appraised at an astounding $300,000 to $400,000. Though this is a staggering appraisal number, it would only end up fetching around £100,000 when it was actually sold.
You know, to own a guitar that was once owned by both John Lennon and George Harrison, can you get a better history?
Number 5. Van Dyck painting. As we've seen earlier in this list, Antiques Roadshow has had its fair share of impressive paintings over the years, but one particular masterpiece stood out from the rest.
Knew nothing about it. I spent £400 for it.
A portrait, believed to be by renowned Flemish painter Sir Anthony van Dyck, was brought in for appraisal and left both experts and viewers astounded. Shockingly, this item was picked up by Father Jamie MacLeod at an antiques shop for just £400. In the end, it was awarded an amazing valuation of around £400,000.
The way you can almost see the bone under the nose here.
Cash he planned to use for a new church bell. Number 4. Mobile lovers. Banksy has become synonymous with contemporary art rebellion, and his thought-provoking works often fetch high prices.
It was on an old piece of wood, this piece of wood, which was in an old doorway just outside of my club.
In a surprising turn of events, one individual brought in a piece of his called Mobile Lovers to Antiques Roadshow.
This is the Antiques Roadshow, and this was done on April the 12th this year.
The piece was actually confiscated from the Bristol Boys Club until Banksy himself wrote to them saying it now belonged to the club that he used as his canvas. When brought onto the show, it was given an eye-watering price tag of £400,000.
If you have had an offer of something like £400,000, my instinct would be better safe than sorry, take it.
The owner eventually sold it and used the money to help his and other local youth centres. Number 3. Fabergé flower. Geoffrey Munn was astounded when 2 British soldiers came onto the show to show the public this fabulous item.
The flowers are made of enamelled silver and tiny silver stamens, but in the centre there's a dewdrop of diamond glinting in the sunshine.
Fabergé eggs are known for their opulence and craftsmanship, but this flower study takes it to another level. Made by Peter Carl Fabergé himself in the very early 1900s, this delicate creation is adorned with diamonds and other precious gemstones.
I find Fabergé things on the Antiques Roadshow, but nothing of this scale.
Being both created by a renowned craftsman and being composed of already high-value materials, you just know this thing is not going to come cheap. Its value? Around £1 million.
In my opinion, that this is worth £1 million.
Really?
Wow.
Number 2. Angel of the North.
But it is an original.
That is an original, but that existed before the real thing.
We're not talking about the actual full-sized sculpture here, so don't worry. No, this is a maquette, or small-scale model of one of Britain's most iconic sculptures, the Angel of the North.
And indeed it was an angel or a group of angels who heralded the birth of Christ. using something that has a deep resonance in our culture.
Created by artist Anthony Gormley in 1998, this maquette was used to visualise and design the monumental sculpture that stands in Gateshead. Its valuation on Antiques Roadshow was handled by Philip Mould, who had no choice but to give it one of the highest valuations, another impressive £1 million.
I think on the basis that this is half the size, I would comfortably value it at £1 million.
Amazing.
Number 1. FA Cup.
I'm really rather stunned and shocked with what you brought along.
There are few achievements as prestigious in football as winning the FA Cup, but how do you put a price on the physical prize? This version brought onto the Antiques Roadshow was constructed by Fattorini & Sons and is actually the one that had the longest career in football, used between 1911 and 1991.
What would it have been used for?
Well, I think the fact that it's got all these vines and grapes on it, it might have been used as a wine cooler or a champagne cooler.
It's no surprise then that the price tag put on this trophy by expert Alistair Dickinson was a mind-melting £1 to £1.4 million.
I think quite comfortably this has got to be worth well over £1 million.
What do you think is the greatest item ever brought onto the show? Let us know in those comments below.